there in '88, as soon as they all left Somaliland, and I went there to look for my own father. And of course, he was an elderly man, late 70s, sick, and he ended up walking from Hargeisa to that place together with my stepmother, my grandmother, my cousins, and all my family members. And actually, I landed in that place, and I knew almost everybody who was in there because I came from that city. And as if I came into Hargeisa, but in a refugee camp. I went and I saw some of my relatives, fantastic, who came from Kuwait, who was visiting at the time with his kids, and he was all having sharpness in his body and having a lot of blood, and I actually died while I was there. And his last words were, "Can you please take care of my kids? I don't think I'm gonna live long." And I think the experience that I had seen in that place at the time was horrifying. I could not believe that the government would bombard its own city, as Dr. Ed was saying, take off from Hargeisa airport and start killing people in the same city. And those who were the pilots and others were being compensated heavily for the number of killings that they actually made. So this was my whole little experience, but I still have a clear memory of what I have seen in that place, and it's really horrifying. It was very sad. And I really felt bad coming from the African Development Bank at the time. And these pictures actually brought a lot of memories back to my mind to see what has happened to the people of Somaliland during that time. But let me make my statement and first thank those of you who have organized this event. I think Somaliland as a whole are very grateful for your support. I want to thank the members of the Parliament. I want to thank the Honourable Nigel Farage, President of the United Kingdom Independence Party, James Caver and his colleagues for hosting this conference. I'm very glad also to have this opportunity to address members of the European Parliament about Somaliland's achievements and aspirations. And I would also like to thank the Member States and the EU institutions for the development assistance which Somaliland is receiving. The people of Somaliland are deeply grateful for your support. I would also like to focus today on three areas: Somaliland's re-emergence as an independent state, the case for recognizing Somaliland's independence, which was mainly done by Michael, so I won't go into depth into that issue, and our wish to see development assistance routed through the Somaliland Development Fund, of course an area that Dr. Saad will lately discuss. I would also like to talk about the relation with Somalia and our contribution to the international efforts to combat terrorism and piracy in the Horn of Africa. I would like to begin by recalling the recent history of my country. I think most of you have heard it from Michael and others. But as you might all know, Somaliland was a former British protectorate from 1884 to 1960, and it became an independent state. As Michael mentioned, 5 days later, we joined our group. So I won't actually go into the details of that because I think Michael has covered the 5 days experience that we have been an independent state and the number of member states that recognized Somaliland at that time, the General Assembly and the United Nations. But unfortunately and sadly, that proved to be a disastrous decision for my own people. Almost immediately the people of Somaliland were excluded from the decision making and the representative governments in the new Republic of Somalia. In turn, my people rejected the Somaliland Republic's constitution by referendum. And this union that has been created at the time actually brought a lot of isolation from our own people. I think in 1961, the Somaliland Army cadets, most of them actually trained in Samuel, a couple other military institutions here in the UK, staged a coup that was aborted, which highlighted that within a matter of months, many had already disgruntled with the Union and with the Italian Somalia. In fact, those young cadets realizing that we're getting a role and they have actually started having their own coup right from the beginning. After assuming the power, of course, Somaliland, Siad Barre came into power, and of course, as has been said before, close to maybe from 50,000 to 100,000 people, civilians were displaced and killed. And almost close to 1 million, as Edna was saying, were displaced as refugees. But following the collapse of that state in 1992, the people of Somaliland decided to withdraw from their voluntary union and reassert Somaliland's sovereignty and independence. The clan leaders and the elders of Somali national movement accordingly declared independence on 18 May 1991. In the meantime, many people built peace in their country through a bottom-up process, drawing on traditional conflict resolution methods. I think it's a process of also, the process we have used actually works. In fact, my feeling experience was mainly working in the area of conflict resolution in the Middle East and Gaza, and Jerusalem and Darfur. And quite a good number of the people that I have been dealing with actually felt that the method that we have used, the traditional method, the indigenous method that we have used, is probably one of the best that we have actually done. I think that process was purely indigenous and involved up to 37 reconciliation conferences, which have actually worked. A referendum was held on 31st May 2001. The people of Somaliland endorsed a new constitution and confirmed their desire to maintain Somaliland's independence. Somaliland held a multi-party municipal elections in 2002, parliamentary elections in 2005, and two presidential elections in 2003 and 2010, the last of which involved a peaceful transfer of power between political parties. International monitors have witnessed all of Somaliland's elections since 2003 and pronounced them to be free and fair. By all counts, we have one of the best democratic records in Africa, and I think, even though we are not yet recognized it, we believe that Somalia has done really well when it comes to managing its own resources. Coming back again to the way that we have managed it to help and build our own nation, we have built ourselves chiefly with the finance from the diaspora. We now have more than 400,000 students in primary schools and secondary schools, 16 universities, and at least one health post in almost every district. Government revenues have increased as a result, and we have been able to introduce free primary education for both boys and girls, which is a major step forward. We have also established a social bank. However, despite these significant achievements, many challenges remain, because we have an ambitious 5-year national development plan which has been shared with the donors. Somaliland enjoys a strong case for recognition. I don't think I'll go back into that because I think Michael has eloquently articulated that issue under the international law, and I think he has given a clear explanation of what has happened and the fact that we also meet all of the requirements of the statehood, and I think the fact that that union was never endorsed. But in Africa as a whole, as he also said, there is other parts of the world that have a lot of problems. I think there is a nervousness about changing existing borders. And I think Michael has also mentioned that issue, that many borders are purely arbitrary and were drawn to meet the interests of the European colonizers, not the indigenous inhabitants. In some cases, ethnic groups are split, leaving significant minorities on different sides of the international border. The international community worried that allowing change in one country, particularly in Africa, could create a ripple effect which could result in other regions trying to succeed. But I think Somaliland's case is very different, as has been said. And of course, we have an independent state, so I think those borders and the fact that Somaliland has an independent state really doesn't have any problems with us. I think in Somaliland, I would also say that the Somaliland people have also made a repeated occasions, including in 2001 May, a referendum where 97% of the population voted in favor of Somaliland being recognized as an independent state. The Republic of Somaliland, the democracy, this desire has also been evidenced by their support in elections for parties supporting independence. My government cannot ignore the stated wishes of its own people. There is a democratic consensus in favor of independence. I think Michael has actually articulated that issue extremely well. But the international community has not taken into account those factors as it seeks to re-establish Somalia on the basis of the borders which existed from July 1960 to May 1991. The provisional constitution lays claim to Somaliland, and Somaliland has listed the coordinates of an executive economic zone, which includes the waters adjacent to Somaliland coast. Somaliland unequivocally rejects these claims to our territory and water. While we endorse the need to stabilize Somalia, we believe that trying to re-establish it on the basis of the borders which existed for just 31 years is an act of folly and has the potential to stoke conflict. After all, if you do basic mathematics, the British Protectorate of Somaliland existed for 76 years before the formation of the Somali Republic. Combining the years that Somaliland was with the British Protectorate and its reassertion of the independence from Somalia, it has functioned as a separate state to Somalia for over a century, whereas Somalia has been lawless for longer than it has functioned as a stable nation. So we know that the vision of a greater Somalia does not work, so why insist of trying to recreate it again? We request the international community to support the two states of Somaliland and Somalia, living in peace side by side. Somaliland has the ability and the experience to also help Somalia solve its own problems when Somaliland is recognized. The re-establishment of a new Somali Republic will not succeed. We call on the international community and the EU member states as one of the leading players to acknowledge the reality on the ground. It's time to accept that the union between Somaliland and Somalia is integrated in 1991. And for my people, we have learned from our mistakes, which means that there is no going back to that failed union. The reason why Somaliland works as a state is because it built its own internal peace from the bottom up and has inclusive democratic institutions based on universal suffrage. Somaliland has made tremendous progress for the last 25 years, and as an independent state, it's time to recognize the independence of Somaliland. The European Parliament has an important role to play in encouraging the international community to take a fresh look at this issue. If the outside world continues to resist new thinking, it may miss an important opportunity to stabilize the Horn of Africa in the long term. A Somaliland that was internationally recognized will be able to attract more foreign direct investment and receive loans from international financial institutions, which is currently bad. Such increased financial flows will create jobs and lead to increased government revenues, allowing it to deliver better services to the people of Somaliland. Reduced unemployment, especially among young people, would diminish the attractiveness of terrorism and extremism. Stronger government revenues will allow Somaliland to improve its security forces and so become an even more effective partner in combating extremism and differing piracy. Greater prosperity will also reinforce our democracy and allow us to act as even a better example to other countries, including not least Somalia, but about how it's possible to build peace and democracy from the grassroots. I wish also like to say a few words on our relationship with Somalia. I will say our relationship with Somalia, and for obvious reasons, we feel a special sense of empathy for the sufferings which the Somali people have endured, and we welcome the progress which has been made by Amazon in driving Al-Shabaab out of the towns and cities it formerly dominated. We also thank the European Union and others for supporting that initiative. We look forward to a time when peace can be restored to Somalia as a whole. Its people deserve nothing less. Of course, we have our own political differences with the government in Mogadishu, but we seek to resolve those through negotiations and dialogue. In particular, we began Somaliland-Somalia dialogue in June 2012, which aimed at clarifying the relationship between the two countries. Turkey has generally facilitated this process, and it has given Somaliland and Somalia a platform to discuss their own differences. At a meeting between the President of Somaliland, President Ahmed Mohamed Silayo, and the President of Somalia, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, in Djibouti on 21st December 2014, a month ago, we agreed to continue those talks and committed to resolve our own issues in a harmonious manner. And we have agreed to resolve our discussions through dialogue that would lead to separation and to a two-state solution. We have asked the President of Djibouti, Ismail Omar Guelleh, to kindly host the meeting, and his country is willing to be involved in the talks when needed. What we would like to see is more explicit support from the dialogue, from the EU. The EU was represented at the first round of talks in Jennings House, but not since. The dialogue provides a unique opportunity to secure an agreement on Somaliland status by peaceful means, and we hope that our friends in the EU will be willing to become more involved. We are also making the same appeal to the UN, to IGAD, and to the EU. But we do believe that the EU, given this statute, would be an ideal institution to get involved in the talks between Somalia and Somaliland. I can reassure Somalia that an independent Somaliland will be a good neighbor, ready to cooperate in promoting the peace and prosperity of both of our peoples in the Horn of Africa. It's also important to keep in mind that Somalia has been the most failed state in the world for a number of years. And there have been a lot of tragedies in South Sudan in the last couple of years also. Does the international community really want Somaliland to become like those states? No. We do believe Somaliland should be supported to maintain stability, its peace, its democracy, and to be a member of the international community. On the issue of the security, Somaliland collaborates actively in the fight against terrorism, piracy, and extremism in the Horn of Africa. We spend a large part of our government budget, up to 52% actually, on security. We work with other countries in the region and the wider international community to exchange information about known terrorists. We are all aware that terrorism emanating from our region could also mean in the streets and transport networks of the European cities. We do believe that we spend a lot of time and effort to ensure that peace and stability in the region stays. The incidence of piracy off the coast of Somalia has fortunately decreased in the past 2 years. Somaliland has played a crucial role in international efforts to combat terrorism, piracy, and extremism. It has participated in the international contact group on piracy off the coast of Somalia, as well as the Kampala process. Hargeisa plays a host, Somaliland, Hargeisa, plays a host to an office of EU Cab Nesta, which concerns in improving the regional maritime capacity. The prison in Hargeisa was refurbished in 2012 to allow us to house pirate prisoners. We have agreed to accept certain types of convicted pirate prisoners from Seychelles and passed a new anti-piracy law in 2012 to permit this. Given more international assistance, we could do more to help. In particular, our Coast Guard has few serviceable boats to patrol a coastline which is 850 kilometers long. I hope that this conference will recognize both what we are doing to help and what our needs are. And I hope that the EU will support our initiative of combating piracy, and I hope they will provide a lot of support to our Coast Guard. The assistance that we receive from the EU, the international community, and the people of Somaliland have a long tradition of working successfully together across all sectors. We are especially grateful to the EU for the support which it provides. The EU is the largest donor in Somaliland and has been a long-standing friend of my country. It was the first to establish an office in Somaliland and was soon followed by its member states, Denmark and the UK. And we would like to encourage more member states to follow suit. In September 2012, here in Brussels, the EU agreed the Somaliland Spatial Arrangement, which is a separate and a distinct part of the Somali Compact within the framework of the New Deal of Fragile States. What the SSA, the Somaliland Spatial Arrangement, has done is to strengthen the way we work together with the elected government in the lead, and a stronger spirit of partnership and coordination with other doers. My colleague, of course, Dr. Saad, will provide more information on the issue and on the national planning development issues. My government preferred financing mechanism, of course, I should also mention, I think, nonetheless, the EU support Somaliland also continues this work to support and try to reduce the number of youth unemployment. We also try to combat gender and sexual-based violence, including FGM. My government's preferred financing mechanism for the Somaliland Spatial Arrangement is the Somaliland Development Fund, originally set by the UK and Denmark, to whom we are grateful. I'm glad to report that Norway and the Netherlands have now started to support the fund. We are committed to making this a success story. The EU aims to join the fund in 2015. We need to ensure that the bureaucratic process do not slow this process. And we need your support to ensure that the EU actually joins that fund. The fund has already started having an impact in terms of building the capacity of the state. Important projects such as the Berbera Road have now started. I would also like to invite the international partners, and especially the EU, to join the fund and establish other mechanisms that model the Somaliland Development Fund. The Somaliland Development Fund illustrates how the New Deal can make a difference. I think in conclusion, I would like once again to thank the team who have invited us. I would also like to say that Somaliland is a very peaceful, democratic, and a nation that's very free against terrorism, a very moderate Muslim Sunni state, as you have already said, Jim. And Somaliland, I think, is ready to be part of the international world. A Somaliland that was recognized internationally could do more to help stabilize the Horn of Africa. Somaliland is in part the product of the European colonization. I appeal to the European Parliament to help the people of Somaliland to achieve their ambition to secure their rightful place in the international community and to support its own independence. Once again, I would like to thank you all for listening to me, and thank you for inviting us. And hopefully, we hope that EU will do much more in the future for Somaliland than what you have done now. Thanks so much.
Okay, we can have a 15-minute break, after which Dr. Saad will come forward and give a general view of the situation. Dr. Saad is the Somaliland Minister of Planning. So we'll have a 15-minute break, then Dr. Saad, then we'll break for lunch, and then obviously we'll be back over. I'd need to check the venue for this afternoon. I understand we're moving over to one of the rooms in the European Parliament, but I'll announce that later. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
waxaa shirkaasi ballaaran uu ka socday dalka Brussels gaar ahaan magaalada Belgium oo magaalada Brussels ayuu shirkaasi ka socday waxaana uu ahaa shir lagaga hadlayay qadiyada iyo go'aansutaaga dalka Jamhuuriyadda Somaliland waan arkayseen baarlamaankii dalka Ingiriiska oo halkaasi iyagu soo qabanqaabiyay arintaasi oo halkaasi ka hadlayay iyo waliba wasiiradeen oo halkaasi joogay oo imika hadda dhameeyay wasiirka arrimaha dibadda ee dalka Jamhuuriyadda Somaliland mudane محمود بيحي يونس oo barteen arinta uu ka hadlayay qadiyada Somaliland oo ahayd mid aad iyo aad uga waramay taariikhdii Somaliland isla markaana Europeanka uu soo bandhigay in ay Somaliland ay tahay meel xasiloon oo ku taala geeska Afrika oo nabad leh oo waliba leh election aadi aad u wanaagsan oo ay doorteen madaxweyne si dimuqraadiya lagu soo doortay oo magaciisa la yiraahdo Axmed Maxamed Maxamuud Silaanyo ayuu halkaas ka jeediyay waxa iyaduna hadda imika la galay qadar yar oo brief waxa halka kan isaguna taagan oo isna dhow hadli doona wasiirka qorsheynta ee dalka Jamhuuriyadda Somaliland mudane Saad Ali Shire oo halkan jooga iyo waliba adna آدم إسماعيل أو يدنا وزيركي هراء أرمها دبدا دلك جمهورية سوماليلاند أو يدنا كاسي كهالي دونتا يقولي با برلمان كا يوروبيان كا أو يقولنا كاسي كهالي دونا يقول أسوقات إنه كهالن قضية سوماليلاند ويكجو أنت هاي غير يوروب إن أي سوماليلاند أي تاجران قد يدودنا ست تبع أي كهالن دايس مع الحجادن تلفزيون كقرية جمهورية سوماليلاند بروسلس وانا راليك هذا قدر دبديدا ايان كسو نقون دونا انتين هودا مر لبا ديب كل مدونا ودارس مع العجادن oo iskaga tagaya saasiyo nabadgelyo waa biljam iyo soo noqon wanaagsan